Hello. I just recorded this whole dang thing like an hour and lost it all. So the good news is I hope to stumble over myself a little bit less and to get a little bit more said and done in the time that we have here. The bad news is I'm a little bit less peppy than the first time. So let's do this. Hi, my name's Sutton, amateur strongman competitor. Most of my content recently has been really short form, just kind of training logs and single things to really replace what I used to post on like Instagram or Facebook or any of those places, because I don't have any of that anymore. And it's good to get more of a record out there for what's been going on. Life's been kind of crazy, where I had a great run through college of training very consistently. It was easily one of my top 3 priorities in life. I don't think I've had a really good run of training since like 2018. And a lot of life's happened since then. So I've had these sporadic 1 or 2 month spurts where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get it all back. Or I need to lose all the weight for my wedding. And then it goes away. So really, really happy that this time around I set a goal of competing in a strongman competition on September 30th. I set this goal like May 15th. And I saw it through to the end. And it's been the best run in the gym I've had forever. So man, I wish I could find the video. At some point last year, I attempted a 365-pound deadlift, something I lifted first when I was 16 years old, and I failed it. And on top of that, I was fat. So it's really quite depressing to be like, I'm 100 pounds heavier than I was when I first tried this, but I still can't move it. So I've come from that to where in the previous weekend's competition, I hit 350 pounds for 19 reps, and I'm comfortably in the mid and upper 4s for sets of 5 with form that I'm really, really proud of. So it's been great. And there's maybe 3 or 4 people that rely on me in some extent for training advice or for programming advice. So it's really small, but I thought it might be useful for me to do something long form where I go through and just explain my thought process step by step for how I build a program, and really practically do it for myself, because I have to plan out the next 8 weeks of my own training. So with that being said, my job has me on call 24/7 and my phone rings all the time. So that's why this can't be live. It probably never will be. So there'll be breaks. That's because I look over here and there's a work call coming in, and there's a text or an email, and so I've got to respond to that. So if you're willing to bear with that, if this sounds exciting to you, let's talk about some strength programming. So to be clear, we're talking about strength programming. Training your muscles, working with barbells and dumbbells and different implements to get bigger and stronger and faster and healthier. That's what my passion is. Now, a question might arise: why are you writing your own program? There's plenty of good programs out there, and it's completely valid. Here's my answer. It's not because I think I'm smarter than Jim Windler or Mark Ripito or Mike Israetel, or the list goes on and on and on. There's so many high-quality programs out there that are either cheap or free, that have been tested by tens of thousands of people with great results. Why would you not use those? My answer, and it might be similar to your answer, I might be putting something into words here that maybe some of you feel, is that I get just as much enjoyment and excitement out of figuring it out as I do from lifting the weight. So if I were to be given the perfect program and all I did was perform in the gym, that's great, but I'd be missing something, because it's exhilarating for me to have the idea and go, I wonder if I doubled my volume on overhead press, would I be able to add 20 pounds to my max in 6 months? We get all these little goofy questions, and I've tried so many things, and like 95% of it is garbage that I'll never try again. But I even like that. I like knowing for sure if something works for me, if something works. And I love, being the coach and the athlete at that point. That's something I want to talk about at the very end. But then getting in and kind of treating the gym as a laboratory to figure stuff out. So if you're going, if for whatever reason it's right for you to either modify an existing program or to write your own, you have to start somewhere. And it's very wise to first, before you make a plan to do anything, is figure out where you are, what you have been doing, and figure out, well, what if that works that I want to carry forward? What if that's garbage that I want to let go of? So let's talk about prior to this last program, because this thing ran from, I started this the 10th of June, and I ran it through all the way till September 30th on the competition day. And I wrote this down like May 30th. I wrote down the results that I wanted to get in competition. So 200-pound log clean and press, I wanted 12. I got 4. 300 ended up being 350, and a 13-inch deadlift, I wanted 20 reps. I got 19. That's okay. Farmers got bumped up to 150. I wanted 16 seconds. I got 10.9, and fastest time. Tractor pull, I wanted 45 seconds because I had no idea how heavy it would be. I ended up getting 19.5, which was good enough for 4th in my class. So prior to this, where was I? My job is pretty sedentary right now. I travel a lot. I spend 25 or 30 hours a week sitting in my truck driving. So hip flexors are tight, all my lower body stabilizer muscles are shut off. Definitely I can't come back in like first day off the road and do a heavy lower body training day. That would be very unwise. So my activity level, which was at one point pretty high and very high when I worked in the warehouse and I was expected to move 10,000 cartons a night. My cardio was great. After about 2 months I could do that. And so my GPP was through the roof. Now it was like nothing. So 2,000 steps a day was hard. So before I did this, I actually just started walking. It's like I don't need to go push a barbell. The biggest bang for my buck in terms of physical training right now is increasing my steps per day. So we got that up to 8,000. 10,000 wasn't consistent enough for me to say that was my baseline. 8,000 was about baseline. I started doing hikes and long walks, and even as I started the weight training, I kept the walks in at the beginning, and it helped a ton. So I had to get ready for training. And then let's dig back into it again. My thought process was, well, I know that bench press makes me stronger and it makes my chest bigger, but I can't do push-ups right now. So my goals were like 20 push-ups. And, I know that that overhead press makes me stronger, but, dips kind of help the overhead press. So I worked my way to body weight dips. And so I had to earn my accessories back. The training day is organized main movement, secondary movement, accessories. Sometimes conditioning comes in before main movement. Sometimes secondary is not there, or you can call it a second main movement, whatever. And by main movement, I mean that, okay, if I'm really strapped for time, I'm going to go to the gym and do one thing. What am I going to do to get the greatest return? So for lower body, that's your squats or your deadlifts. For upper body, that's your bench press, your overhead press, and pull-ups and things like that get put in there as well. But I couldn't start with main movement, secondary, accessories because I haven't even earned my accessories yet. The accessories build the secondary, which build the main movement. So, if you're starting at 0, don't stress out about getting to 10. The leap in benefit from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 is huge. So, let's talk about how to explain this sheet. I work on 4 training days per week. I do 2 on, 1 off. It leaves me an extra day for whatever to happen. 3 days turned into 4 on the road. I'm sick. It's a holiday. I need that extra day to where everything goes right and I consistently train 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. Then I finish my whole training week in 6 days. And by the end of my 4-week block, I've banked up 4 days for anything I need. Do I want to spend those extra 4 days maybe extending my deload? I can spend them getting ready for the next block. I can spend them trying to clean up and, I didn't really get my log press on the last attempt on week 3, so let me try to get it on week 4. So I like banking those whatever days. It works pretty well with kind of the demands of my job and my lifestyle. So in a 4-week block, my thought was I'm going to easy on week 1, harder on week 2. Week 3, I'm going to be at my best. Week 4 is a deload. Or it's cleanup work. So I'm giving myself 3 weeks to peak in a little mini block. and then 1 week to kind of back off and recover a little bit. It's starting a little bit more meta, but was 3 weeks enough for me to get a lot of the exercises? Yeah, the general pattern was week 1 felt fine because it was easy. Week 2 was a trash fire. I would miss my goals. I'd be tired and beat up, but then I'd come back in week 3 and I'd smash all the goals I set for that whole month. So and that really messes with your head, because it turns into like, well, did you need that bad week 2 or did it hurt you? In any case, the 4-week block, which is really 3-week plus deload, worked fine for me. I want to experiment with 5 weeks. So 4 weeks of progression with the same movements and the same training modalities, pushing one of the pushing volume or pushing intensity, or driving down your rest times, whatever your metric is. And then that 5th week becoming a deload. So I want to see if I can stretch out the main movement progression for longer, because in general, I do what works until it stops working. The first 2 weeks of gains in an untrained movement. So I'm talking about, I haven't tried close grip incline bench in a year. I'm going to consider that relatively untrained. The first 2 or 3 weeks of gains are really just technical, and then you're only really pushing it hard and grinding out strength gains for a week. But then after that, you hit that diminishing returns. And so let's do this. I'm going to try. Oh no, this menu is fighting me. So every time you make gains in the gym, it's some curve like this. And we can call this, your first week, you're really not getting stronger. This is going to kill me. You're really not getting stronger, you're just getting more technically proficient, and so you make lots of wild gains really fast. But then on week 2, it starts flattening out a little bit, and then maybe by week 5 or 6, or maybe it's 6 months down the line, you've got to work really hard to add the next 5 pounds to the bar, 2.5 pounds to the bar. And so we're familiar with noob gains in a general training sense, that the first time you start training, everything's going to go up fast, but we just kind of accept then it's going to fall off and you're going to have slow progress for over years. That's definitely true. In my limited experience, I would rather get all the gold out of the movement and then leave when it starts getting grindy. So if I can add 10% on an untrained movement that I haven't touched in a while in 3 weeks, but then it's going to take another 4 weeks to add the next 2%, I'm just going to train it for 3 or 4 weeks and I'm going to move to something else. And so rather than my body strength, growing at this super slow rate over the course of years, I'm getting about the same rate of development by hopping from here to here to here to here, where the curve is the same, but I'm bringing up things that I haven't trained in a while in a more rapid fashion. So I can get, you'll hear things like, I want a 5% gain in 3 weeks. That's unsustainable over a long period of time. But if you're swapping out the movements every 4 or 5 weeks, you can hit that. So let's make it a bit more concrete. All that to say, I'm going to pick a movement. I'm going to pick a way to progress it. I'm either pushing up the reps, or I'm pushing up the amount of weight on the bar. Typically, those are just the only 2 things I'm touching. And I'm going to do it until it starts to cover off and I hit that diminishing returns, and then I'm going to abandon it and switch the movement and do it again with a different movement. And the test to see if this works is, okay, I got a 10% gain out of my bench press over the course of 4 weeks a year ago. And I went from 185 to 225. If I come back a year later after having not touched it and I can start at 190 or 195 instead of 185, generally got stronger. And it's very slow gains, but it keeps things fresh and it lets you practice with a lot of different things, which just, it works for Strongman because there's always different events. So let's talk vocabulary here. I like to use colors in my training because I'm not very smart. So the red here is conditioning. Whenever you see something in a red box, it means the primary focus for that day is to get a conditioning effect from the training. How do you know when you've succeeded in that session? You blow along. You're gasping for air, you're sweating all over the place. That's conditioning. Blue is strength. The victory condition for that is the numbers have to go up week to week, right? If you have to add weight to the bar. That's the only way to know you're actually getting stronger. Orange for hypertrophy. How do I know when one of these orange days has gone well? I leave with a huge pump. I look 30 pounds heavier than when I walked in, and I'm sore for a little bit longer. That's generally an indication that the hypertrophy went reasonably well. And then green for peaking is kind of a catch-all term for me. It's like, well, if I've got to be really fast, really explosive, or really technical, these things that don't really fit well into strictly strength or conditioning or hypertrophy, I'll put it in green. So something like a max log, I would put in green, because that requires a different sort of it. It's not as simple as just strength. It's a mixture of the explosiveness of the technique and things like that. But I would also put like an AMRAP deadlift set in peaking. It's not really hypertrophy, even though you do train high reps for hypertrophy. If you're trying to develop a strategy and develop the specific ability to go 10 or 20 reps past where you normally fail, that's a form of specific peaking. I guess you could think of anything as green as adaptations. I do not plan to stick around for the entire year. This is something that I want to be good at for 1 week or 1 day out of the year, and then I'm not. My quality of life really doesn't change. My training doesn't change if those adaptations go away. You can't plan to be at your best all the time, especially when it comes to heavy strength training. So, 16 minutes in, let's talk about the training program. So what you're looking at here in these boxes, these are the end block goals for each training day. So for my upper A, which is the first training day of the week, by the end of the block, my goal was to accomplish 1 set of 10 bodyweight dips, because that was out of my reach. I wanted to accomplish 4 sets of 12 super ROM side laterals, Renaissance periodization style, and 5 clean pull-ups. And so I'm writing the end block goals here because I think, in terms of a general overview, this is a pretty good indication that I'm ready for this next thing, and this next thing, and this next thing, and so on and so forth. And these are the sort of things that I think are going to build me up to compete well. So if you're just putting the goals in to these big boxes, you've still got to plot a path to get here. So I'm going to focus a lot on this first block because it went pretty well. So the goal is 1 set of 10 bodyweight dips. I started with 2 sets of 2, and they were very painful. So let's look at the actual log here. On week 1, I started with 6 sets of 3 bodyweight dips. And then on week 2, on the same training day, I did 6 sets of 5. And then I cut back the volume from 30 total reps to 10 total reps, but it's in one straight set. That's how I got my 1 set of 10. And that worked really, really well. That progression knocked it out of the park. And then the most encouraging thing is 10 was hard, but for the next 3 training blocks, now I've earned that accessory, and I can get a set of 8 whenever I want it. And a set of 10 with a little bit of preparation. So that was cool. I was able to keep the gains from that better than almost anything. And it goes on like that from here. So upper B, my goal was 1 set of 20 push-ups straight, because I couldn't do that. So I started with 3x10, and then I did 3x12, and then I did 1 set of 20, and then I did 1 set of 16 on my deload week. So deload's not coming down that much farther. But so that's how this works. I put the big goals I get 4 to 8 big goals per block. And then I got to plot a specific path. So I had to figure out, and this is cool too, because you get to think through, how am I going to get to 1 set of 10 bodyweight dips? There's a lot of ways. You could overload it with weight and get your sets of 5 with an extra 45 pounds up, and then the body weight's easier, just lowering the RPE. You could do something like I did, which I like doing many sets to overload the total volume, and then cutting down to get that straight set run up. But it doesn't work the same for every movement. This is part of the experimentation I like. So let's kind of do a block review here, because we got to point out some of the stupid stuff too. This whole hack squat thing. Your ego is your absolute worst enemy when it comes to training. That's within the session and when you're making the plan. And so I'm 25 now. I'm looking back at videos of when I was 17, 18, 19 squatting, and it's beautiful ATG, pausing in the low 300s, and comfortably I'd take my own body weight on my back for 10 sets of 4 or 5, something like that, with a pause at the bottom. I mean, really Zach Tallender style. And so I'm looking at that and I can do that, forgetting the fact that I sit in my truck 35 hours a week. And I don't have the hip stability to stabilize the knee joint and make it safe. So this whole 4 sets of 12 thing on hack squats really hurt me, to the point where I haven't squatted since I started training like this in April. My knees have hurt too bad. Now, that's an excuse because, well, your knees hurt. You can fix that. If I wanted to squat bad enough, I would be. The bottom line is I didn't think I needed to squat to perform in the Strongman competition. I was mostly right. That being said, when we talk about the next training program, the one that I started 2 days ago, we're going to address the squat question. So we're going to put down here, I have a couple of lessons already written out. The hack squat was just dumb. And there are more detailed notes in different notebooks, but I want to show the process of reviewing your work after you've done. I didn't get in here and say mid-session, these hack squats aren't working, I'm going to cut them off. I kept it on the board. I wrote it down. I wanted to achieve it. I gave it my all for 4 weeks, and that gives me the right to come back at the end of it and really assess what happened and give a more informed opinion on it. If you just give up mid-session, you'll never know if it was a bad idea or if you just gave up. What else worked here? So the dip progression was great. Pull-up progression needs work. 5 clean pull-ups did not happen as easy as I thought. Now let's look at that. I started with 3 sets of 2 on the first training day, and then 4 sets of 3, and then 1 set of 5. But that 1 set of 5, I was cheating like crazy. And so I probably should have focused more on, rather than going straight for the pull-up, because, it took me years to get my first bodyweight pull-up. Focusing on the pull down in more upper back hypertrophy work, because there just wasn't the base of muscular control that there used to be. We're going to touch on this again. I used clean and press for sets of 20 as a method of conditioning, and it absolutely did help me blow out that lung and get very tired and get my heart and lungs some good work. But it also ground my shoulders into powder. So in the future, for conditioning work, we're going to focus primarily on lower body exercises, because on the flip side, the 70% farmer sprint, the yoke walk for 300 yards, the 200-pound sandbag for 50 yards, those things were excellent. The recovery burden on them was low. The adaptations to them were quick and thorough. I haven't figured out how to efficiently do conditioning with upper body specific movements, and it might just not be necessary, right? If you're trying to work your heart and lungs, it doesn't make that much of a difference if you're doing it with your legs or your arms. That being said, I got, except for the hack squats, I got every goal in this training cycle. So let me respond to some work things real quick, and then I will start in the second block. So, second block review from the 8th of July to the 5th of August. Weighted dips were great, but I think I got greedy, right? I probably could have left them off and saved them for later, but they were going so well that I just wanted to keep them going. So, something to know is that when I started, this is the only one that's filled in. The rest of these are blank, or, they're only halfway filled in. So I give myself at the end of the block time to review and go, okay, what's next? And I wanted to keep dips in because they were going well. Axle push press was feeling very heavy. So when it feels heavy up here on the shoulders, what do you do? Well, what I decided to do was to overload the clean movement by itself on a lower body day. If you look at the hip position from the side on a log clean, it's about the same hip movement as a front squat or a Zercher squat, since the weight's low on your body and it rocks upwards. So had to be mindful of the total volume on that, but I went up to like 120% of the competition weight just on cleans and hold for 5 seconds back down to the ground. Yeah, for the next 3 weeks, anything I took up to my shoulders felt light. So that was great. The mistake I made was doing it after my sumo deadlifts, because I'm tired after deadlifting, and I don't want to be tired going into a log clean. I'm taking a big implement from the ground all the way up to my shoulders. And on top of that, it's more technical than the deadlift, if for no other reason that I've practiced it less. I can do a sumo deadlift in my sleep and have it be pretty comfortable. It's tiring, but it's not nearly as mentally draining as a new movement. So we ended up swapping this around, and the lesson learned from that is like, you do the more technical thing first, right? Especially if it's heavy for singles. The only exception I'd have to that is if the thing you're doing beforehand is conditioning. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but conditioning doesn't hurt your strength work, and I've been very pleasantly surprised by that. This 4x10 axle barbell bench, it went really well at the time. It might have screwed me over, my shoulders over for later. Here we go. Barbell bent over row, 1 minute AMRAP with 225 pounds. This is another stupid ego thing. Because, again, I'm looking at old videos where, like, I'm comfortably pin lay rowing 315 for sets of 5. I'm like, well, 225 would be great. And I'm rationalizing it like, well, it's really going to help my tractor pull because I'm building up the volume that my lats can handle. I couldn't hold good form with 225. And honestly, I got a better pump and I felt like better gains out of focusing on with a little bit lighter weight and really focusing on the deadlift work. So because of this dumb hat squats thing in the first block, this 2 sets of 20 with 40-pound dumbbell step-ups thing that I was planning on doing just for my quads to get some of that work since I was so hamstring heavy, my knees hurt too bad to even do it with body weight. That was immediately cut and never got done. What worked really well was this snatch grip deadlift. And by snatch, I mean at the collars as wide as I could go. The one alteration I made is I started doing them out of a rack and focusing on like 4-second eccentrics, tapping the ground, coming back up. The idea behind the snatch grip deadlift was to focus on holding my upper back in rigid extension because I have never had good extension in my upper back when deadlifting, and I wanted to practice that for lots and lots of time under tension in the position that I wanted. Snatch grip deadlift overloaded the upper back like crazy, and it ended up feeling great on my hamstrings. It's something I definitely want to come back to. I'm honestly at risk of probably using it too often because it's a lot of fun. So what are the takeaways from this block? Bent over row was too heavy. Need to do cleans prior to sumo. Save heavy cleans for 2 to 3 weeks out from a meet. That's another consideration. You should be picking a movement to do because of an adaptation you want, right? If you're training for a deadlift max single, you might incorporate box jumps because they give you more of a pop at the bottom. They make you more explosive. You might get the same thing out of a higher box squat for 10 sets of 3. I know Josh Bryant programs that for people. I first saw George Lehman do it. But you have to consider, how long are these gains going to stick around for? Right? Let's be more specific. Not every adaptation lasts for the same amount of time. There are very slow adaptations which will last for the rest of your life, or most of the rest of your life, right? Heavy lifting of any kind with sensible form, progressive overload, a sensible program will increase bone density, right? And that's a gain you'll keep for a long time. Hypertrophy work in with a little bit higher volume, pushing past failure will increase your muscle size, will increase the size of your muscle fibers, and that decays a little bit faster, right? You not only you lose the pump quickly, but you see bodybuilders 10 years out, if they don't train, they don't look like they've trained as much. Strength lasts a longer time because it's more of a nervous system adaptation. It's a little bit deeper down. But then you have really, really transitory adaptations. And one of the things that's been good for me to learn is this stuff has been quantified before by people a whole lot smarter than me. Go look up any of the talks by Dr. Mike Stone at any of the big conferences, right? Whenever they're laying out, you'll see slides up there where it's in black and white of like, hypertrophy adaptations will last for X many weeks, while conditioning adaptations, last for X many days. And so, in general, I started to see more and more people say that the conditioning stuff, you can get an improvement quickly, right? If you go out today after doing no conditioning for a long time, and you start running sprints or whatever, or you start doing interval training, it's going to be terrible at first, but you're going to notice a improvement probably tomorrow morning, right? If you go from 2,000 steps to 10,000 steps in a week, you're going to feel the adaptation in your ability to probably sleep better, recover better, all that stuff quickly. But if you stop, you're also going to lose it faster. So with that being said, I noticed that this adaptation from these heavy cleans, the specific adaptation being that it feels lighter now because I'm used to holding heavier weight up here. That adaptation only lasted for maybe 7 days. 14 would be very generous. So planning out in the future, it's like, okay, well, if I know my conditioning gains are only really going to last for 14 days, I should plan to maintain a baseline throughout all of my training. But if I need to be conditioned for the competition, I'm going to ramp it up right before the competition rather than trying to cover it all sooner. So that's why, if you look at the mix of colors here with conditioning, that's why I've got more conditioning right here at the end than I do in this block that's 6-8 weeks out. So I just needed to think the same thing for these cleans. And then we already talked about snatch, creep, deadlift. I started taking them out of the rack because taking them from the floor with that wide, I was like 6 inches away from my body. Ended up being a similar position, but I felt more secure taking it out of the rack. Still lowering all the way to the ground, but I felt better holding that position. What else here in this one? So that's the second block. I think these first two were by far the most successful, right? And that's partially because of work reasons. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So let's get ready to talk about block number 3 from August 5th to September 2nd. So block number 3. This was another I consider pretty good. I went from really 135 being a challenge on barbell overhead to 5 sets of 5 with 185, and we hit that. Again, this whole bent over row with 255, trying to get back up to this idea that I should be rowing 300 was just wrong. It was asinine. Probably because, thinking back to when I was rowing that much, I was doing all of my upper back work as a superset with pressing work. So I always did pull-ups supersetted with my overhead press, and I always did rows supersetted with my bench press. That's something I got from Brian Alster. And Brian Alster knows what he's talking about more than I ever will. That worked for me pretty well. One of the reasons why it worked, though, is because the demand on my upper back from my lower body days with just regular deadlifts or regular squats was pretty low. Here I'm doing farmers, I'm doing sandbag carries, I'm doing snatch grip deadlift, I'm doing regular deadlift, I'm doing throws by the end. I couldn't bring my upper back the same sort of punishment on my pressing days, so that's had to be reorganized. That's something that's going to my new program. I'm not doing the upper back, the row, and the pull down training on my pressing days anymore. We'll see how it goes. There's every possibility I'm wrong, but I've had to put it back with the lower body days just so I could predict recovery a little bit better. Again, this idea of conditioning with upper body work didn't really work out for me. And the volume on my log, this is where I noticed the shoulder pain in my left shoulder first. I started getting intense pain while pressing overhead with my shoulder. I couldn't do a side lateral with 10. I couldn't lower the weight enough on any shoulder movement, whether it's a side lateral, a front raise, an overhead press, dumbbells, barbells, log, throwing. I couldn't get to a low enough weight where there wasn't pain, so I got myself in a bad position. And I noticed it here, but there's every chance that it went wrong here with this 4x10 axle barbell bench, or before then with 4 sets of 12 side laterals. It's the shoulder volume got too high for me, and so got involved with the chiropractor. And rather than just kind of a one and done, we saw each other weekly for a while, and I got my set of rehab exercises. But I'm sure the rehab exercises helped. What also helped was I cut out this log conditioning in this block. I just didn't do it. I would do some technique reps, but I kept the conditioning to in this block to be this 80% farmers that I worked up to 400 feet. And this one set of 16 on this deadlift with a 4-second eccentric, that's also conditioning. You burn through a crazy amount of oxygen doing that. Big success here, 6 sets of 4 with 405 on the wagon wheel deadlift. I was doing that after these farmer sprints that I got up to 140%. I ended up getting those up to 210 pounds per hand, which was a huge benefit. And by the way, so let's just put this, I'm just going to put this out there and be absolute about it, because I love giving myself opportunities to look stupid in the future. I'm just going to say overloading farmers works, especially at my weight where I'm expected to carry, 200 pounds or less per hand. But we're not talking about a 900-pound total farmer's walk or anything like that. I overloaded it like crazy. I trained it every week pretty much this whole time. Never the same modality. Some weeks I'm really light, I'm going for long distances. Some weeks I'm heavy and I'm sprinting, but I kept up with it. I really overloaded it, and I got the fastest time of the day for all classes in the competition. So this block, it has its problems, but it was really my last good one, and here's why. My job is very seasonal. I never know what the next 48 hours looks like. Right now I'm sitting here, and it looks like it's Wednesday. It looks like I'm going to be able to work from home Thursday and Friday and have a weekend. But there's every chance in the world my phone's going to ring, and I'm going to have to go to the airport or drive to Georgia, be 6 states away from home for the next 5, 6, 7 weeks. It's happened before. So the day-to-day is very unpredictable. That's why I have like the whatever day. I have a 6-day week, and the 7th day helps account for some of the margin of error. But at the same time, I know in general what seasons are going to be crazy and what ones aren't. So in general, from February 1st to Memorial Day, I'm busy. I'm booked up. I don't make plans. I don't go on vacation. I don't commit to anything that's more than a week out from happening at the time. And then from Memorial Day to about September 10th, oh, that's lovely. CCleaner. My computer runs great until it's almost irreparably broken. I don't need you, CCleaner. Then from Memorial Day to September 15th or so, there's this calm, glassy sea. Things are slow. I'm home the vast majority of the time. My sleep's consistent. My eating's consistent. So I can gain a lot of strength. And that's where the vast majority of this training fell. So all this went la, 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 went great. I forgot that work gets crazy. And so the competition's on September 30th. September 10th hits. My workload tripled overnight, and it's not an exaggeration, because on top of the busy season hitting, we had some people leave the company, and I took on some extra workload. And now the territory I'm covering doubles, so I'm Dallas, Houston, Austin, Oklahoma City. I'm lucky if I'm even staying within the state throughout the week. So this last block, I've got all these goals here where the log probably wouldn't have happened for one set of 30 because it's dumb with my shoulder. This 190 AMRAP, yeah, I did that, but the AMRAP was 1. The arm over arm sled, I never took the time to set it up. All this stuff fell through because I got so busy that I was training 1 day a week, maybe 2. And so, what do you do when you've got 1 day a week to train and you're right about to compete? My solution was, I'm just going to train my worst event. everything else is on track. You know, I've got to do 350 for max reps in a minute on deadlift. I'm pulling 485 for 4 or 5, and then I'm doing AMRAPs with 365 at 16 reps. So deadlift probably wasn't going to get so weak by not training it that I knew that adaptation would carry through, and I'd still have 80 or 90% of it, even if I didn't train it at all for a month. But log needed some serious work. And in farmers I did because, every time I trained farmers, my session went better. So that's something I want to touch on right here at the end before we switch over to the new thing. So I wrote down all my expectations for the competition. On May 30th, I wanted to get 12 reps in the log. Well, I got 4. And that put me in 14th place to start. A 3-way tie for 11th, but it's just another way to say that. We had a 370 that was originally going to be 18 inches. It ended up being 350 at 13 inches. I wanted 20. I got 19. That was good for 4th. Farmers ended up getting bumped up to 150 pounds. I wanted 16 seconds. I got 10.9 for the fastest in class. And then tractor pull, I wanted 45 seconds because honestly I just wanted to finish. I ended up getting 19.5 for a 4th place finish. And then they added the bag event after I wrote the program. Because my shoulder hurt so bad, I didn't train the bag. I'm naturally, I like throwing, so I'm good at it. And I have the benefit of a couple of brothers who've been doing Strongman since 1895. And so I get so much out of just one training session. I'm really, really blessed to have that because instead of me spending 4 weeks hitting it once or twice a week and adjusting things and taking videos and doing all the stuff that we normally do, I can spend a Saturday with them and they can tell me 3 or 4 things right then and there that completely change the movement. So I knew, because I just listened, okay, well, if I bend my arms about so and I let go at about my chin, the bag's going to go where I want it. And so I did every week. I do a couple of practice reps with it. I wouldn't call that training. It's just checking to see, okay, am I still doing it right? It lands right where I want it to. I'm not going to touch it because the extra volume is just going to hurt my shoulder. I'd rather spend what recovery budget I do have in my shoulders on my log press and just let the throw be what it is. I think that was the right call. I ended up getting 10 reps. The 11th wasn't quite the buzzer beater I wanted it to be, and I got second for a 3rd place overall out of 20 competitors with no upper weight limit in the class. I'm really going to lay it on thick because I'm really proud of it, but at the beginning of the day, I was pretty despondent, like, oh man, these guys are a lot stronger than me, and they are. And the guys who took 1st and 2nd deserve every bit of it. They're very strong guys who worked really hard. But 3rd place was a very good result for this competition. My goal was to kind of kick myself out of novice, so I wanted to earn the right to go open, which sounds silly because it's called open. But nevertheless, that was my idea, and I think we did that. So notice that I'm going to call this video something like Writing a Strongman Program Live. And the first 45 minutes are reviewing what you just did. That's not by accident. I don't particularly care about driving up the length of this video because it is not and probably will never be monetized. But I think it's that important that in charting a course of where you're going, you need to have that good of an understanding of where you've just been, what's working and what's not working. Just like I did, I touched on it before this program. I wanted to do all this stuff, but I'm taking 2,000 steps a day. The evaluation process of where you are, what you've been doing, what's working, what's not, is probably the most important part of designing a program for physical performance, because you're going to answer most of your questions before you start. So, with all that in mind, what's next? Am I just slipping into a general training thing, or am I training for another event? I'm training for another event because that's a lot of fun. So, I'm training for a Strongman competition that happens on November 25th. It is all mystery events. Now, I can tell from previous years what's likely to be the event. I know what I'm likely to see. I know what I'm unlikely to see, and I've done a show for the promoter before, so I know about what his weight selection is. So I'm not going into it completely blind, but with that being said, how do you train for a mystery event? You just go in strong. And so how do you maintain strength? With fives. I want to say 4 to 6, but with fives. So the vast majority, just don't overcomplicate it. I've got 55 days. I'm planning on training almost everything, all the main movements in that 5 rep range, and then the accessories will probably be 8 to 10 reps. And I'll just do whatever feels good for blood flow. And I'm really just programming the main movements here because that might be all I have time or energy to do, right? Like on Monday, I woke up, on Monday I went to bed at 1:45 in the morning in an Econo Lodge somewhere in Houston, Texas. I was having to sort out a car rental for something happening in Georgia. And then I couldn't sleep because stress was too high. And then I woke up and I had a bunch of meetings. And then I drove 5.5 hours back home. And then I had a bunch of work to do. And then I ate a little bit of dinner. And then I went to go to the gym at 8 o'clock because I'd rather go than not, even though the science says I'm better off sleep, just going to bed. At a certain point, I want to dig this into my lifestyle. And so I understand there's diminishing returns. But I'm also not a professional and I never will be. I'm going to proudly wear the word amateur here because it means for the love of, and I do love training. I do love strongman, what little I've been blessed enough to experience. All that being said, I've been awake for 16 hours. I'm going to go take an hour to train, and my food's not on point. Yeah, I'm just going to do the main movement and leave. That's where most of the benefit is anyway. So, and this is true for the previous thing anyway. You saw 2 things or 3 things in each one of those goal boxes. There's accessories after that. There's a warm-up before that. But I'm going to spend all of my focus on the progression and the planning for the main movements. And the accessories, I'll progress them if I'm getting a lot out of them. If I notice like, hey man, this skull crusher with the wide grip is carrying over like crazy, then yeah, I'll build it in as a supplemental. But otherwise, the accessories are there for blood flow, a little bodybuilding work, a little flexibility. So here's my my main movements. Here's the main focus for this thing. I'm gonna pick untrained movements. So I haven't done them for an appreciable length of time in like a year. So I'm primed to get more out of them. I'm going to pick things that are pretty joint friendly because I just got done with a competition and I'm feeling fine, but I don't want to push it, right? I can also see the videos of myself performance. Like, yeah, there's probably a little bit more strain there than I'm feeling currently because I'm still pretty happy. I'm gonna train things in 5s, and I'm gonna just progress the weight. Don't overcomplicate it. So I'm gonna train upper body 2 times a week. On one day, I'm gonna focus on a standing barbell strict press because I haven't done it in forever, and by golly, it works for building strength. I'm gonna do 3 sets of 5, and then on the second upper body day, I'm gonna take whatever that 3x5 weight was, and I'm gonna do an AMRAP set with it. That's just what I want to do right now. And there's some, I could justify it by saying, it's based on the AMRAPs in 5 through 1, but it's really a mixture of Wall Street Weightlifters program, and I want to see, I want to experiment with progressing based on an AMRAP number rather than just casting it out there saying, okay, I need 15% growth in this over the next 5 weeks and making it happen. So it's a different form of auto-regulation. I'm looking to have some fun with it. That's the first thing that I'm going to do on the upper body day. On that first upper body day, I'm also going to do close grip barbell bench press. How do you like that acronym? CGBBBP for sets of 8. Because I know from experience that if my close grip sets of 8 go up by 20%, my overhead press is going to go up by 15. It has great carryover. and I haven't trained it in a while, so I'm primed to get something out of it. Seated dumbbell overhead press. Now, I just got done talking for 45 minutes about how shoulder volume hurt me, so we'll see on this one. But as a reaction to this being hurt, I've cut the shoulder-specific training down to almost nothing, so I want to try and work that volume back up, but it has to be painless. I'm not going to hurt myself to get some more seated dumbbell work in. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm writing it down here, but I could probably leave this seated dumbbell overhead and this dumbbell tricep extension. That's done behind the head. I could probably leave that off the main program, but I just want to give myself a clear picture, and it feels good. And every time I work my behind the head extensions, my triceps tend to feel like they're ready and they recover faster because it's a really deep stretch, and it's a fun accessory that I've been pushing and training since I was like 13 years old. So that's my first day, and you notice here that I don't have end of block goals. That's because I don't know what I can do with 5 weeks, and so I know where I started. Right, I'm going to try to add 5 pounds, but this is more of a. Again, you got to kind of figure out what season you're in. If you are in a place in your life or your year that you can, or you're making a comeback, right? So I know I can deadlift 405 for 10 reps, and it's going to take me 3 months to get there. Then by all means, fill in the numbers. That was fine, but I got more out of something the last few months have taught me. I got more out of just knowing the movement and the style of progression. Was I pushing the reps or the weight? I got more out of that than setting the specific number. And honestly, the numbers become a distraction, because I'm here to train fives. I know fives as heavy as they get, and if I were to start throwing numbers on here, it gets in the back of my head. Well, I just got done putting 200 pounds over my head for 4 reps, and it was pretty easy at the time, so I could probably get 200 for 5. It's just one more rep, right? But how sustainable is that? I trained for 3 months for 1 day. I'm not going to hold that all year. So we're going to switch the movement to something I'm bad at. It's really a standing barbell strict press. Doesn't feel anything like a push press with a log. And so I started with 125 for 3x5. It was decently challenging. Now I expect to progress that pretty quickly, hopefully up to like 175 for 3x5, but I'm not in a rush. So that's the upper body days. Now, for the back squats, here's the deal with the squat right now for me. And I'm just going to show the video of, let me hunt that thing down. So I consider myself decently strong. I can pull 450 pounds for 8 reps on the deadlift with a neutral spine, and then I eat a bowl of popcorn and I don't even burp. This is my squat, and let's be transparent here. Empty bar. This is the best I can do. Let's take this back down. I've got long femurs or whatever. Then that you can already tell there's lumbar flexion here. This is unacceptable to me. This is like 40 minutes of trying to get the barbell down 2 parallel or below. I got my feet close. I got them wide. This is probably one of the wider ones. That bar path scoops forward like 3 inches at the bottom. And this feels like hamstrings on calves. This is as low as my brain is telling me I can go. Now, I shouldn't expect perfection in one session, but I can't lie. This was exceedingly frustrating for me. Because I've been lifting for a long time, and I can usually get somebody's squat right on the first day, and I do the same thing that one of my brothers very graciously did for me. You review the starting strength squat, because you can put 100,000 miles on a starting strength style squat without an oil change. It's wonderful. And doing my best, and this is what I have to offer. And by the way, you can't see, my wrists are like this, because if I straighten them like this, my shoulders feel like they're going to tear off. And I'm not doing this. I'm out wide too. So for the sake of my pride, I would probably rather not do the squat, because it's horrible, and I could do more. And I could go to a belt squat, or I could go to a safety bar or spider bar or whatever. It's a basic human movement I need to be able to do. And so this right here is not good enough for me. And unfortunately, it feels in some ways as though I'm starting below zero, because I can't even get the bare bar right. Again, if you can't offload enough weight to fix the problem, you've got to get some other things down. So the plan is to do 3x5 back squats and do the same AMRAP thing, matching the same weight. But in the meantime, that's every single off day I have is, well, let's work on hip flexibility, because if it's hip flexibility, I know how to fix that. Let's work on knee health. If it's knee health, I have a reasonable idea of how to fix that. If it's just that, I need practice, I'm going to drill it into the ground. So that's the workout I did last night for 10-3-23. Abysmal failure. 45-pound squats. I did 10 sets of 10 body weight squats, trying to get the movement pattern back in, and I'm a little sore in the upper thighs now. I can tell, hip flexors and all the inner thigh things that sit still and get tight if you're sitting in the truck a long time. Those need a ton of work, and so we're taking a bunch of steps backwards so we can go forward. But so who knows what this number is going to end up being. The other last thing to touch on is that for this next program is, where does all the upper back work go? Because I'm not doing pull downs or pull ups prior to my overhead press, and I'm not doing rows prior to my bench work. So where does that go? I'm kind of back to an older mentality, but for a different reason. Because when I started training, it was all bro splits. You have back day, and back day starts with deadlifts, and it ends with all the upper back machines in the gym. You just go down the row and you do 3 sets of 10 on everything. That's how you should train. And then when I went to college and I discovered Brian Alsruth specifically, then I became smarter than everyone in the Western Hemisphere. And I was, really the upper back is, should be trained primarily with a focus on shoulder health. So it's all these superset things. And that's probably great. For whatever reason, I haven't figured it out yet. And it's probably because of the insane upper back taxing stuff that I do in my lower body days. That just hasn't worked. So this is what I was talking about earlier, is this is where I'm getting the rows and the pull downs. I get them on my lower body day afterwards, because I trained upper lower off, 2 on 1 off in that style till I go. So I have a full day of recovery after I finish my upper back work before I go back into the next press day. So I shouldn't be sore, but I should still be a little tight, which hopefully will help with the stability for overhead press and for bench press. And it's got to go like that, because my first day back after being on the road is upper lower. This goes upper lower off, not lower upper off. Not just being pedantic here. If you get off a plane after flying for 10 hours, or you get out of the car after driving for 10 hours, or you've been sitting at the desk all week and haven't been able to get your workouts in, your first session back probably shouldn't be lower body. I mean, we have really unfortunate stories of people, getting off a plane after flying to Australia or whatever. I think this is Andrew Locke was talking about this on Dave Tate's podcast, which he was on like a month ago. It was funny. I was prescribed the Locke 3 like 2 days before that podcast came out, and so anytime a physical therapist or chiropractor, whatever title's on the door, gives me a corrective exercise, I go look up who it's named after or who came up with it, because I want to be smarter than the doctor. So when I got the Lock 3 for my shoulders, I'm like, yeah, who's this guy? And then I discover Andrew Locke. I'm like, oh, this guy is to the shoulders what Stuart McGill is to the lower back. So I was very pleased about that. Anyway, if you've been sitting down for a long period of time and all these stabilizer muscles that keep your spine where it is and tell your hips how to move, and help you brace and all that stuff, all that's like shut off, and you get off a plane and you go, okay, well, the next training day I have is deadlifts. Don't do that. Like that's where people break their backs. So I'm going to take a couple steps down off my soapbox. My first day back in the gym, because I'm going to get a 2-day run, is going to be upper body, because it's a little bit less risk, and I'm still getting that lower body warm-up. I'm doing a standing strict press. Now, the load's not enough to bring my lower back into injury territory, but it is enough to wake it up, that where I train my upper body movements, and I'll be doing rows, and I'll be bending over, and I'll be moving around with weight in my hands all day. But that's enough that when I come back the next day to do my squats and my deadlifts, I feel a little bit safer. So that's it for that. Now then, I said in the beginning that the reason I do my own programming is because I told you a work call would come in. So I said in the beginning that one of the reasons I like to write my own programs is because I get just as much out of figuring this stuff out as I do out of lifting a successful weight. If I was a gifted athlete, which I don't know that I am, right? And I had all the support in the world, the best lifestyle, the sleep, the food, drugs and doctors, whatever I needed, and the best coach in the world, and I was making all my lifts, I would still feel like I was missing that piece of like, yeah, I figured it out. I figured out how to progress a box jump in 4 weeks such that it increased my being explosive on deadlift. That's what I love. So with every single program I do, whether it's a 4-week program, 12-week program, 16-week, or I've got one coming up that's 6 months, I'll talk about at the end here, I want to experiment with something. And I know most of it's going to be trash. I never try again. But some of it works, and I carry it into the next one. Like the way that I progressed and trained that snatch grip deadlift, that was an experiment. The way that I progressed and trained my dips, 4 months ago, that was an experiment. It paid off. So what are the experiments here for this competition? We may be running this program from the 2nd of October to the 6th of November. I'm going to do an AMRAP with the previous training days 3x5 weight. That's an experiment. I don't know how that's going to go. It might be that it screws up recovery and then they cancel all the gains out and you end up worse than you were before. I don't know. Or it could be a great way of auto-regulating. So I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out as best I can. Number 2, this is a fun one. I'm going to progress the amount of warm-up sets. Here's why. I compete in Strongman, and it's not a friendly training environment where you get to start warming up at 135, 225, 315, 365, 405, and so on, like you would in a normal a deadlift day. Sometimes you've got deadlift coming up in 10 minutes. The opening weight is, 450 pounds, and the only thing that you have to warm up on is a barbell in the grass. It's a stiff. You're pulling on a deadlift bar, but it's an axle in the grass with 315 on it. It's you and 50 of your best friends have to warm up on the same thing. That happens, right? And you can sit there and be a princess and say this is an amateur meet, or you can try to get ready for it. So you can get ready for it like you get ready for anything else. I'm going to go from having lots of warm-up sets, and I'm going to go less and less and less and learn to take bigger jumps and see how my body reacts to that. So I'm started out with 8 warm-up sets, which is excessive for the lightweights that I'm working. 8 warm-up sets to go from 45 pounds to 125 on the strict press. Now, it's more volume, but most of the volume is under 40%. So it's debatable whether that even counts towards total training workload. But it is technique practice. And I was pretty comfortable by the time I got there. So next week it'll be 7 warm-up sets, and then 6, then 5, then 4. all the way down to 2. So you've got 2 jumps from the empty bar to your working weight, because that reflects the competition environment. And that's not just on, I use the deadlift as an example. The log was the same way. I'm used to going, first I warm up on a barbell because the log's 135. Then I take 135, 155, 175, and so on. On the training day, I got to lift the 135 log 3 times, and I jumped straight to 200. I think I could have done better if I had been more prepared for jumps like that, because it's never going away, right? I think at the top levels of the sport, there's a set-aside warm-up area with replica implements, and like they have like secret songs and things that they sing to each other. But on the amateur level, where I will be for the rest of my life, I hope, it's that barbell is still going to be sitting in the grass. There's still going to be 315 on it. So you got to learn how to work in not optimal conditions. And this whole 2 warm-up sets for a max movement, that's not something I plan on keeping year-round, right? That's something I want to progress and peak for in a fashion that maybe I can hold for 1 or 2 weeks a year, and then take data from it. So that's the training program. Now I'm going to work into 2 general discussions. One on that whole, how do you get data from training whenever you're the one who wrote the program? Because it's not self-evident, and there's a couple of things that are really frustrating that it took me way too long to learn. And then 2, we're going to talk a little bit about conditioning, because I'm fat enough to be an authority on conditioning. So this whole data thing, you won't know if it works unless you actually try it. This is true more so for the established programs, your starting strengths, your 531, and so on and so forth. It's more true for them than it is for your own stuff. But hang with me here. If you are writing your own program, you're essentially saying, I'm going to be both the athlete and the coach. I think that's fine, but you can't be both at the same time. You're not the coach in the gym. Because what happens if you're both the athlete and the coach in the gym, once it starts getting hard, you're going to say to yourself, this progression really didn't make sense. We're going to do sets of 8 instead of sets of 10. Or we're going to do 3 sets instead of 5. Or you'll overshoot, right? You get my point. If you start rewriting the program on the fly and go, what I really meant to do was this, you will never know if it works, or you will never know if it just doesn't work, or if you just didn't try. So this is something I've had to drill into myself like crazy. It's like, wow, some of these things I wrote down were really stupid. But I won't know that for sure unless I actually do it, and then that gives me the right to say, listen, I ran my own dumb plan for 4 weeks, this exact block, the exact way I wrote it out, without failing once. I know for sure this worked, this didn't, this didn't, this didn't. And I can settle it right there, and I don't have to try it again. But for years, like the entire time I was in college, I was trying to be the coach at the same time. So I don't know if if a lot of that stuff was a good idea or a bad idea, or if I just didn't have it in me that day, if I was a little bit less disciplined. Because we talk about how fun training is, and it really is fun. It's a hobby, and it's a privilege to have the time and the resources to go lift weights when you don't have to work manually for your job, right? So, but when you're in it, it is hard. And even for the people that love it the most, I mean, you love it, but there's a certain misery whenever you're walking up to set 3 out of 5 and you barely survive set number 2, right? You got to be tough to do weight training over a long period of time, because it just gets harder and harder and harder. It has to. It must get harder. So don't give yourself the out of editing the program on the fly. If you're the coach, be the coach. And so when I'm sitting here writing this, I'm remembering all those times I wrote down something stupid. And so over time, the program's become more conservative. That's the route I'm going with this. On the note of writing a conservative program, It's my belief that you should write a plan that you can execute on your good days and your bad. Because if you write a program when you're feeling great, like you just got a promotion, or you know work's really easy at the time, and you just finished your favorite meal, and you're sitting there sipping on a C4, talking about how great the next 8 weeks are going to be, you're going to set a set of standards that you're not going to be able to live up to day to day, and you're more likely to give up. I'm more likely to give up because I've done that before countless times. If you write a program that you're like, okay, what could I do and make progress and succeed if I have the flu and somebody shot me in my right leg and I just got fired? Well, now you're thinking in terms of priorities, because you might only have one thing you can do right in the gym per day, and it's going to be that squat. It's going to be that overhead press. And so on the bad days, like I've had plenty of them where I slept for 4 hours and I still wanted to go train, you can still succeed and put a check mark in the program. But on the good days, where do you put the extra energy? Does that 3x5 become a 5x5, or do you add 20 or 30 pounds? Some practical advice here that's worked well for me. If you have excess energy, excess strength, dump it into your accessories. Your accessories are your way of investing in the next session, not the current one. If you think of, you finish your bench, there's nothing you can do that day to help your bench press again. It's done. You've dug a little hole, and now you need to recover. Your accessories are for what am I going to do for the next time I come in and bench? What can I do now that the bench is over so that next time it's easier? I'm going to work on my triceps. I'm going to work on my shoulders. Whatever you want to do. Dump your excess energy on your good days into your accessories to have a better next session, because you can bank that and compound it going forward. It's been like 3 calls in a row. I keep on forgetting my place. I feel like every time I pause recording, I come back looking more disheveled, because just work always gets crazy after hours because everyone's trying to cause you problems for the next morning, it seems like. So let's wrap up this discussion with a nice little bow. We just got finished talking about putting your excess energy into the accessories, because in my view, the accessories are your investment in the next session, and you don't have, that might be the one where you have the flu, right? So the extra work on the little single joint stuff, your tricep extensions or your hamstring curls, that might be what allows you to hit your baseline on the main movements for next week when you come in and you're not feeling so good. I think that point's cursed, because every time I try to loop back to it, something happens that I gotta pause recording for, and I lose my train of thought. Let's go to this last thing that I missed earlier. Let's talk about conditioning, because as a chubby boy, I am the authority on how conditioning works. I just want to speak frankly about my assumptions about conditioning prior to training like this, because I've always been awful about it. When I would start developing body image issues, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm too fat, I would just spend half the session on the treadmill or doing something like that, or it's going to be every minute on the minute interval training till I lose the weight. And I wasn't using conditioning in a productive way at all, because it was always just trying to drive the heart rate up, drive the weight down, which I guess has its place. This time was different because I used conditioning for performance. I need to get really fast carrying the farmer's handles. I need to get really fast pulling a truck, and I need to have the endurance to actually give an all-out effort for a straight minute, because a minute's a long time if you haven't trained for it. So I started throwing in these red days, right, where the primary focus was doing this conditioning. And the upper body red days, I don't know if I'm going to repeat that, because really, if you look here, I got one set of 20, which is conditioning, and then an incline with 4 sets of 5, which is strength. So we should probably have some multicolors here, because it's not a straight conditioning day. Same thing here with the deadlifts. But I noticed that if I did the conditioning first, if I did my 400-foot farmer's walk, or my 200-foot sandbag carry, or my long yoke walk, or whatever it was, it's usually one of those, before I came in and did my main movement, one, I didn't need half the warm-up because my whole body's warm. And then two, I felt amazing, like emotionally. And here's this thing, like strength training doesn't give you endorphins. We get a sense of accomplishment from not dying under the big rock. But whenever you hear people talk about like a runner's high, like, you know, their sense of euphoria or well-being, as I'm sitting here eating Doritos thinking that's skinny propaganda. You're lying. But the reality is, I think it works something like this, that if you run really, really fast, or really, really long, and then you take a break after you pick yourself up out of the puddle, you get this rush of endorphins because your brain thinks, congratulations, you got away from the lion. you escaped the angry man with a spear. I mean, that's why we have that's why we run quickly. So in the science would tell me that if I do high rep exercises, or I do conditioning work before a lower body exercise like this right here, a farmer's walk for distance at 80% prior to a deadlift, well, no, I've depleted the glycogen stores and my muscles are empty and I'm not going to get any gains. I don't know. It might all be true, but I know that my sense of well-being emotionally was greatly heightened by doing the conditioning first. And I speak in gamer terms, so I just called it a +5 blessedness bonus, or buff. And so this is something too that if I want to maintain a baseline conditioning throughout other training programs, we're going to do it first. We're going to do it prior to the main movement and let that carry it through. And I'm not going to worry about, you know, if I walk too far, I'll get smaller. Alan Thrall, into kind of, there's been a lot of eras of Alan Thrall, right? I discovered him in like 2014, 2015 when it was very much strongman focused. Then he went through the starting strength era, and then he became a dad, and now he's on to his own different thing. But something he said that really opened my eyes at one point was like, if you're a strong guy talking about how you don't want to do cardio because you don't want to get smaller, you sound like the skinny girl who's like, I don't want to train. I don't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, don't worry, you won't. Avoiding baseline activity because you want to avoid extreme results that people work decades for is just asinine. So conditioning's got to stay in. So last, this is the plan to get me through the 7.5 weeks between me and the competition. Got a 5-week block, 1 week deload just in case I get hurt or I'm beat up or works really hard. And this 1 week of peaking is like, okay, I'm going to be training with a barbell back squat for the next 5 weeks and a standing strict press. It might be a good idea to handle a log and an axle and a circus dumbbell, or, you know, the things that I'm likely to see in competition. But those adaptations arrive quickly and they decay quickly, so I can do them a week or 2 weeks prior and still get most of the benefit out of them rather than grinding them into the ground for 10 weeks when, you know, it's just not needed. That's the plan to get to this competition. What comes after that? Well, go figure, long-term plans tend to yield better results. And so I got a lot out of 3 months. But I think and I hope that I'm ready to execute on like a 1-year plan. And so keeping in mind the rhythms of work that I've talked about and other things like that, what does that look like? Well, I've got this opportunity from Memorial Day to September 15th where my recovery can be great, and so I'm going to push the attribute that I care about the most, and that's strength. And so as far as the year goes, I'm going to build it around supporting this summer run where I get as strong as possible, and hopefully I can compete and do a show like August 15th and be at my best for the year. But how do I support that? Well, I should probably lead into that with some hypertrophy, but it's going to have to be a different kind of hypertrophy because it's my busy season. I know I'm going to be stressed out. So if what we mean by hypertrophy is high volume training, it's probably not going to go well. So we're going to probably explore some higher intensity methods, not because they're better than anything else, but because they're easier to recover from than pushing to 6 sets of 10 on squats or something like that. And hypertrophy being the primary focus from Thanksgiving to Memorial Day of the following year, about 6 months. We've got to have a baseline level of these other qualities, though, of conditioning, of strength, and of, call it explosiveness, speed, peaking. We got to have a baseline of all of these skills to not let them decay too much. And so it takes so much less to maintain than it does to build. It's ridiculous. So if I'm doing 4 days a week where I'm pushing everything and the lowest rep is 8 reps, that's all hypertrophy, trying to grow muscles. And I don't care if on average I get weaker, because I know it's going to happen anyway. If I do 1 day a week where I'm getting in my sets of 5, I can do a lot to maintain strength. Maybe half of it, which is a lot better than 0. And if I get 1 day a week where I'm doing a long farmer's walk, where I really get my heart rate up and work my conditioning, I'll do a lot to keep the conditioning I have. Not all of it, but half is better than 0. And then the only difference being, we could replace the word peaking here with max effort. We're talking 95% grinding work that maintains a certain level of CNS adaptation. I could probably afford to do that like once a month on an untrained variation, 95% of what I'm capable of at the time, right? So I'm not going to do nothing but hypertrophy training and then come in and take my all-time max on squats, because I'm going to hurt myself. But if my all-time max on squat is 455, which I know right now it's definitely not, but I know I'm good for about 385 on that day, I'll come in and take 375, 365, and grind through it to maintain some of that. But that's like the conditioning, the strength, the heavy grinding work, that's like 20%. The rest of it's hypertrophy until Memorial Day. Then boom, hypertrophy comes down to 20%. Conditioning and strength take a front seat. Let's grind out some reps. Let's get really strong. And then the rest of the year, we do what I'm doing here. It takes a lot less to maintain than it does to build. Just maintain the strength you've gained as best you can through the end of the year, and then start it over with another building phase. That's kind of the general outline of the year. So let's see if we can recap this mess. And if by some chance you don't know me personally and you've lasted through this whole video, I owe you a birthday cake. I don't know what kind of cake you like, but I'm going to suggest New York style or a turtle cheesecake. So let's make it happen. Let's kind of recap this. If you want to design a program for improving yourself physically, weight loss, gaining muscle, gaining strength, getting faster, going for longer, any of that, it can be done. We didn't talk about basic training principles here because that's background knowledge that I assume, and maybe that's the wrong call, but following the principles of specificity, of overload, of adaptation, keeping in mind simple things like everything works but nothing works forever, understanding there are trade-offs with every single system and accepting them ahead of time, all that good stuff. Spend the vast majority of your time understanding where you are and how you got there, what worked, what helped, what didn't. Carry that through to the next thing and make an iterative process. If you want to get in on the game of figuring this out for yourself, you need good data. That means being a good athlete when you're an athlete, being a good coach when you're a coach, not trying to be both at the same time. And it means keeping good record of what you've tried, what worked, and what hasn't. So that's that. If for some reason you liked kind of the longer form thing of me going through thought processes, thank you very much. Subscribe. Most of the stuff's shorter form, but leave a comment, say if you like it. This is easy for me to do. I could do this for probably 5 more hours, but we should probably narrow it down and pick different topics. Other than that, I don't have a lot going on social media wise, so there's a very good chance that I'll be able to kind of respond to everything. But for anyone still around out there, or if I'm just shouting into the void, thank you, Void, very much for your time.